Okie dokie. I think there's probably time to cut in. Oi, oi, oi! Welcome to the Vomitorium, everyone. As always, I'm your host, The Metal, here to talk about, well, whatever's going on in the news that matters to me particularly. Maybe what matters to you if you happen to hop in the chat and point the conversation that way, but obviously, it's my show, so what matters to me comes first. Not that there's too much to talk about. I do have a few things pulled up. But the most important thing, I think, is an update, since I was talking about it last time on the show. My dad is feeling a lot better. Still in the hospital. Turns out that he had a hemorrhaging from a couple of falls that he took throughout the winter, finally catching up with him. But he is cognizant. Everything is coming out very mumbly, but in clear, precise sentences. So he is aware of where he is and what's going on. His memory seems to be completely intact. He's just going to have to make a physical recovery at this point. So that's a little update, continuation of my father's recent health issues that even caused me to take the day off just a few shows ago. Everything's looking fine. Okay, that aside, let's get into some other things. Something really cool happened. I am not an American football fan. I don't know if you could probably tell that from looking at me, or if you're a regular to the show, you probably just know I don't really care about football for the most part. I used to watch it a little bit when I was a kid, and then I grew out of it. But on a national NFL broadcast, Bubble Loop Swamp from Banjo-Kazooie ended up playing after I think somebody got like a touchdown, or there was like a big victory or whatever. It was pretty cool. I wasn't watching it. This was past my way afterwards. It was during the Steelers versus Ravens game for, I guess, the season final playoff contender. And yeah, during the game's final minutes, it included a segment from the 1998 N64 classic Banjo-Kazooie, a game that I've played all too many times. Not as much as the sequel, because for some reason we didn't own the original Banjo-Kazooie while I was growing up. We only owned Banjo-Tooie. So it's a song I'm familiar with, but not as familiar as those in the following game. But it was really cool. Mostly after the fact. Even if like I had a premonition and you told me it was going to happen in the game, I probably still wouldn't have tuned in. It's not my cup of tea. But we are now in that generation where enough of the people involved on these projects, people like the players themselves, the management of the systems and everything, grew up playing games like this. I'm sure whoever is in charge of the team's PA or the network even, I don't know who would have done this, probably grew up playing Banjo-Kazooie themselves and thought it was fitting to play a segment from Bubble Gloop Swamp during the game. It's something that would have been unheard of at the time. But video games have just become that much ingrained in everyday life that we should be used to random sporadic appearances of songs we know and love in places that seem previously ill-fitting. Most football players I knew were also into playing video games, but as I grew up, more and more people in general got into playing video games. It just became kind of such a normal thing. It was no longer like a geek hobby. And now I think most people in general, if you're within a certain age group, a certain age or younger, are probably into some type of video game. And why wouldn't you be into Banjo-Kazooie? It's probably one of the best ones made. That was just a quick little tidbit of something that happened in a football game. And probably the most I am going to care about football for probably any time in the next decade, unless something like that happens again. My interest in that stuff is as sporadic as music from video games being played in it. I'm more of a rugby guy anyway. Next on top of that, in a recent interview, great composer from Nintendo has been involved in most of their projects from when the late arcade / early NES era started, all the way through to the late aughts, though he still occasionally composes something here and there and oversees it. Koji Kondo let people in to know why, as of Ocarina of Time, you stopped hearing the main overworld theme being played, and well, he started moving in different directions. And he thought it because he thought people would get bored of it. Now, Mr. Koji here, I'm gonna have to tell you. It's fine to want to shake the music up a bit. I don't think he thought we'd be bored of it, because I don't think he knew what the players thought. A little projection of he'd be bored with it. I get working on a project for a really long time to the point that, like, you just get tired of doing the same thing over and over again. It doesn't feel very creative to try to remix the same motifs into a new track over and over. You just want to branch into some other territory, and that's fine. But I do feel he'd be more bored of it than us, the players. Players, especially young kids, like familiarity to a certain degree. Like, novelty is good too. But there's sometimes where you get so used to something, it feels like it should be there. And I think that is a little true for things like overworld themes, if you're supposed to be in the same place. Now, if you're taking yourself to another land, like, say, was it Koholint, right? In A Link's Awakening, there you would kind of almost expect different music because it isn't Hyrule. But in Hyrule, nobody's going to fault you for putting the same music in that they're used to hearing in the overworld of Hyrule. It feels like it belongs there. And I think maybe this might also be a cultural detachment, because I'm an American, grew up in American culture, and Americans seem to specifically, maybe it's a European thing, because a lot of American culture is basically just Europe too, British too, more than anything, that nostalgia, it seems to play pretty heavily into the things people like. This is not necessarily the case in Japan, from what I've heard. Obviously, you're going to get a mix of everything everywhere. Some people are going to prefer novelty. Some people are going to prefer familiarity. But we're talking about cultural averages. It seems in Japan, anytime you poll anyone, they usually have the attitude of, oh no, we don't need to do it that way because we've done it before. We prefer new things. And maybe he was reflecting the Japanese audience when he thought they'd be a little bored hearing the same music over and over again. And if that's the case, entirely fair. I get it. That's actually your main audience. You should care what the Japanese think first before anything that I think, even if I've been a longtime fan. But I will let you know from a personal perspective, you absolutely never have to change the main motifs, specifically the leitmotifs of the Zelda Overworld song. It is great the way it is. You could just remix it, do it however you want. I know he's not in charge anymore. It's a completely different set of people do the music. Long past have been the days of Koji Kondo. But if for some reason any composer at Nintendo ever happens to randomly listen to my tiny little show, I want you to know, feel free to use the motifs from those older songs. We love it. Feel free to experiment too. That's fine. You don't want to be held down by the people who came before you, but if you liked that old song too, you grew up playing the games and you're like, man, I want to be able to work with that old music, by all means, please, please, I'll appreciate it fully. I will never get tired of that old music. I don't know if anybody actually really does. There's a reason why the Nintendo Music app was brought in by popular demand, or why People always want the songs added to Spotify or on YouTube Music. I have entire playlists where I listen to old songs. Most of the songs that play in the background of the show are remixes of those very same old songs. The day I get tired of listening to that music is probably the day you bury me in the ground. He even says himself, I've always kind of wanted to shake up the music a little bit in any case, especially it being a new 3D game. That one I get a little bit more too. You're jumping perspectives. We're no longer stuck in this top-down or sometimes even just flat side-scrolling environment. You can now look around in every single direction. Even Hyrule itself felt like a new land in Ocarina of Time. There's also a reason why Ocarina of Time is many people's favorite Zelda game even today. It's not mine. Heck, I like Majora's Mask more than Ocarina of Time, but even that's still not my favorite. I've always been more of the top-down Zelda player. Although I like the majority of the 3D Zelda games. I find them fun. But even separately, the category Ocarina of Time is not even my favorite 3D Zelda game. I think that probably goes down to Wind Waker, because Wind Waker feels the most like the old Zelda game, just in 3D. But it does feel like a completely different world. It wowed people when Ocarina of Time was first made. They're like, man, I didn't know video games could really be like this. And that's even after Super Mario 64 had already come out. And people were still like, I didn't know video games could be like this. If there was any justification to shifting up the soundtrack, that jump would have been it. Though we do see he starts to pull back after Ocarina of Time and starts bringing back some of the old motifs again. Wind Waker used quite a bit of them, though some of them he did take from Ocarina of Time. Even Ocarina of Time used some of them, right? The Kakariko Village theme was very much based off of the Kakariko Village from A Link to the Past. Great theme. There's not much you need to do to change it. You just don't really hear the main Legend of Zelda theme almost at all in Ocarina of Time. It's almost absent from the game, I think. I'm trying to think of a place where you actually hear it. It's not in the title screen. You have that nice, eerie, or more so dreary music with Link riding on Epona, and you can almost hear Epona's clocking footsteps as she gallops a little louder than you can hear the music at first. It's quite memorable on its own. I don't think you don't hear it in the menu screen either when you pick your save file. It's not really there during the Legend of the Goddesses at the beginning of the game. I don't actually recall hearing the main Zelda theme in Ocarina of Time at all. It's probably there and I forgot about it. But if it is, it had to have been in like one single spot that it wouldn't clock and register in my brain. It does come back immediately though when we hop over to the GameCube. The original Zelda theme does come up in a different mix in Wind Waker. That might alone be part of why Wind Waker feels more like a traditional Zelda game than either Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, which is really just another game made out of Ocarina of Time, did. The other things that made Wind Waker feel more like an older Zelda game include the fact that it uses a gridded map system. While they are much larger than the original grid was, the map very much was a grid, and most things were kind of in the same place they were in the first Zelda. I think even Death Mountain was probably in just about the same square. I think the only thing that wasn't in the right place, maybe, but it didn't inherently have to be part of the Lost Woods, was that the Deku Tree was on the opposite side of the map of the Lost Woods in the original game. Not that it really mattered. Nothing had to be close to the same place in that game. It was just cool that it had this large gridded system. It was really about exploration on your boat and had some really fun dungeons that were, for the most part, beneath the water, so they felt like they were beneath the map. It took them an entire generation of leaving their 2D Zelda games to make a game that was more like the 2D Zelda games, just in 3D. But I'm glad they found their way back, both in design and musically. I think the world would be lesser if Wind Waker was not around. Tishozo, thank you for showing up. He says, I remember how they ripped off the Great Deku Tree in Simba King Lion. They ripped off everything in that show. I'm not familiar with that. I know of The Lion King, but I don't know of Simba King Lion. That's not in my repertoire of information. But it sounds from what you're saying that it was very much a parody series if they were ripping everything else off. Although I could be getting the wrong impression from that. Next thing on the list of stuff to talk about, Brandon Sanderson says that there are at least more than one, because he says studios, AAA studios, who he personally likes a lot that are interested in making a Mistborn game. Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And he's trying to do some different things with the adaptation rights. He said there's been a lot of talk about adapting Mistborn for well over a decade, which makes sense. There's a lot of talk about Mistborn. Brandon Sanderson is a very beloved author. I haven't read too much of his works. I've read a few, but they're also really long, so if you want to read his stuff, you do have to set around just enough time to read it. And then, especially with the longer series, it's like, well, I don't want to start it and not continue it. It takes a long time to get through his entire catalog. But he's very popular. He also gives a lot of really good writing advice. I do suggest, if you've never watched one of Brandon Sanderson's lectures on writing, to probably go through and watch them. I've watched several. Some of them were good refreshers. They remind me of a lot of the stuff I learned back when I was learning creative writing. But even then, there were some things from his perspective that gave me good insights that I didn't know before, especially with his experience in the publishing industry. Very valuable lectures that you can find for free on YouTube. He just posts them right on his own channel. But they're very thick stories, so I imagine if he was going to adapt them into a video game format, they'd probably end up being very long games. I'd imagine, with the type of stories that he writes, they'd probably have to be some form of role-playing game. Doesn't really matter which style of RPG it is. Maybe not one that's totally open to decision because it is following the plot of a game, of a novel, though there have been games that have followed the plots of novels before that have given you alternate decisions in what-if situations. Heck, the Witcher series even does that, so it's not out of the question that you couldn't do something like that. The type of stuff that happens in his work, I think personally would probably fit best a low-pace action RPG. That would be my suggestion. Not like a really big hack and slash, not something that's like really fast. Maybe something that involves the multiple characters, decision-making, maybe some party swapping, but something that's fairly slow in pace, but lets everybody use all of the abilities that are available to them in the story. That's the type of decision I would make if I was adapting those games. He says that he started to get some real interest on the video game front, and he feels like he's finally getting established enough that he can make Mistborn a game. Like, he can actually make it happen. And then to that end, he's been talking to some AAA developers. It must be exciting as an author, somebody who plays lots of games himself. I've watched a lot of the streams and clips from his book signing streams where he basically, he's got to sign these books anyway, so he might as well be talking like it's a podcast while he's signing, getting it done. And he's talked many times about all of the video games he played growing up. He was always into, obviously, fantasies, RPGs, games like Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Legend of Zelda, things like that. And as a non-recognized author, but in a similar situation, I could imagine that if somebody wanted to adapt one of my projects, that I would be over the moon at the thought of seeing something that I made turned into a video game. For a gamer, that's a creative. That is probably the highest honor you could possibly get. It's also a lot of money you could possibly get. There's that, too. I won't say it's there. But somebody like Sanderson, it's not like he exactly needs the money. It's always great to have more, sure, if you can manage it. But he's doing well enough as it is. So I think from his perspective, getting something from one of your hobbies turned into something from one of your other hobbies is probably the more exciting feature. He's tried this before, but a lot of times the rights for this stuff were tied up with film rights for the last 6 or 7 years, according to him. So you didn't really get to test the market on them until very, very recently. And he's trying to do things differently this time, because he wants to retain control of his video game rights. And he has some interest in some major players. He won't say who it is yet. He won't say who it is at all, which I understand. You don't really want to try to speak something into existence necessarily if you're not sure it's going to happen, because then your fans might get hooked on the idea and then severely disappointed when it just never happens. Building up hype for something that's not a surefire thing is the quickest way to be the laughingstock or a point of disappointment for the next decade or so. Let's see. Oh, if his continue what he was saying before about Simba King Lion. It was an Italian/North Korean animated series ripping off a bunch of things, including Lion King, Bambi, Jungle Book, and even Power Rangers. That sounds wild and all over the place. But in response to what we're actually talking about, obviously nobody would make a movie out of Mistborn or anything. It would probably be a diverse Amazon show. Well, that would depend on who he gives the rights to, right? Personally, and I just dropped my phone, I think his stuff would be much better as an animated series. But there's a lot of fantasy books, I think, in general, would just be much better as an animated series than it would be as some live-action show. I don't think you would need to take Sanderson's stuff and turn it into some type of, like, forced diversity series. A lot of his work is already pretty just naturally variable because that's the type of guy he is. He writes a bunch of different characters. He thinks pretty hard about including different types of ethnicities and races that are natural to the worlds that he writes. I mean, if you were going to pick up something that you wanted to be able to cast a bunch of different people in, his would actually naturally be one of the ones you'd want to pick up to use. It's almost shocking that nobody wants to use it, but maybe it just shows that his stuff isn't quite to that level of popularity yet. It is extremely popular among the fantasy novel audience, but it hasn't quite picked up that mainstream popularity in the way that many of the shows we see adapting now have been. Could it easily? Yes. Because one of the ways that you can almost force something into the mainstream is to have a studio just make a show out of it. People will hear about things that they never heard about before that way because it's finally on the TV. But I personally, believe that if you were going to adapt it, an animated series would be the best way to adapt his stuff. Or a video game, maybe, if you handle it right, which is what he's trying to do. Oh, there was another quote by him I was trying to find. So yes, if you're a decision maker at a AAA studio or a major independent, and you've always wanted to make a Mistborn or Stormlight game, opening up to Stormlight 2, well, you would want to contact my reps now. That sounds like he's very serious. Like, this is not just talking around, jokey. He is letting people bid on it. He really, really wants this game made. I can tell you some genres of video games I don't think would be appropriate for any of his work, as far as I know. I don't know, maybe Stormlight Archives, you could probably get a faster paced hack and slash game out of that, and it might function pretty well by comparison. I'd have to consider that. But most of the games probably wouldn't function well as a platformer, classically. You could probably do like a puzzle game out of a lot of his stuff, where it still has somewhat of that adventure mode to it, but most of the progression of the game were puzzles in between. That could probably work. A lot of his fantasy is very introspective. It's a lot about problem solving. It's a lot about character dynamics. Making an FPS game of his stuff probably also wouldn't be a very good decision. Maybe. Probably not. I guess you could first person shoot some of the magic. No. Lot of type genres, subgenres of franchise wouldn't be appropriate for it. I don't think Mistborn would be good in, like, say, a Warriors game or anything like that. I think a slow-paced action-adventure RPG is probably just the best way to go about making his books into video games. Probably stuff where you don't even worry about leveling yourself, actually. This is something I've considered quite a bit as an author who's dabbled around with the idea of eventually making his stuff into games. And I think the problem with writing a story first and then making a game instead of writing a story for a game is trying to give people a good sense of progression without breaking the story, right? You want these two things to work in tandem with each other very well. And I think there could be a definite problem depending on the nature of your story, especially if it's a story that might have time gaps, might have perspective shifts where you jump to other characters, where involving a leveling system that necessitates grinding can just lead to bad pacing, maybe a little bit of recursion that's not necessarily good in the game, especially if you don't get to level everybody in the story at the same time. I think a better way to do that would be using something similar to like milestone leveling, where by progressing through different parts of the game, maybe the different characters just have access to things they didn't before. Similar to like milestone leveling in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, where you just award everybody in the game levels after they hit certain points in the story, where their characters themselves should have grown. Another way to do that, you could still do leveling, but you could have an account level, or like a file level. This save file, the player has a level. Everybody on every team just is scaled to that level, even if you shift over and do something with another group of people, or if somebody comes in or leaves, they're always at the right level. It's you've earned it as a player. That's a pretty easy way to do it. There are several ways to do that, or you could just not have levels. You could just have other ways of your characters getting stronger, more in a horizontal nature than a vertical nature. You could give gear, especially if your story allows it, very plot-based. They could get gear to get stronger. You could even add some stuff to the game that didn't exist in the original story, like optional gear and mechanics, like magic, anything like that. Maybe some type of blessing on your character that makes it stronger, that the player could go out of their way to get. Similar to how the progression system in, say, a Zelda game is, where, like, Link is very much gaining stats. He just doesn't get stats through leveling. When he defeats bosses in a milestone, he gets more hearts. Or if he finds enough pieces, he gets more hearts too. Gear will make him stronger. He actually does do more damage over time, and enemies do more damage to him too. There's enemies that can do more than 1 point of heart. Technically, everything in the game in Zelda has a number attached to it. You just don't see it because they're trying to simplify it for the player. Everything will do so many points of blank. Even Link's sword does so many points of damage. You just never get to see the health of the enemy. They'll start blinking or something when they're ready to die. You'll know. But some weapons will do more damage than other weapons. It's just how it goes. That's another way of doing some horizontal progression in a game like that. I just don't think, from what I remember of his stories, and it's been quite a while from the few I've read, that a traditional vertical leveling progression would be the best choice. I think either the file, the save file, has its own level of progression, so all of the individual characters are always the same level, or you go out of your way to get gear and other things for the individual characters to make them stronger. I think those would probably be the better ways to do it. But it's a very exciting thing to see that if the adaptations go well, and it's really hard to tell. There's very few adaptations of popular series that are as good as the thing they're adapting, or even make good games. Witcher actually being in the same vein of this, being probably one of the few exceptions to that. Then again, it's often the movie adaptations that are awful. I'm trying to think about some good book adaptations of video games. There aren't a lot of them. Some of them are also movie adaptations, but I've noticed a lot of adaptations from movie to video game that have a novel source will often jump back to the novel source to expand the video game, right? While everything in the PlayStation Harry Potter games is referencing the popular movies at the time that they were made, there's so much to those games that they were often going back to the book, and in some way are more of an adaptation of the book than they were of the movie. Even the final gauntlet, after they get past Fluffy and they're going through everything on their way to the Sorcerer's Stone in the first book, the game's version reflected what happened in the book more than the altered version for the movie. And I remember the first one, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone on the PlayStation, being a pretty fun game. I don't think it was bad. So you could probably throw that in there too. I know there's quite a few Lord of the Rings games too that, because they had to be long enough, they had to go back and take more inspiration from the books than just adapting the movies. Though clearly it was the movies as to why the games were made in the first place. And there's a lot of really fun things. I played a lot of Lord of the Rings online, where you're kind of just a character you make. There's a lot of stuff you go through, but it's happening during the events of the Lord of the Rings. And you end up doing a lot of stuff along on the side and even seeing a lot of the main events as you're playing it. I wouldn't recommend taking Sanderson stuff and turning into an MMO just because of how hard it is to run an MMO and make money off of it. It's one of the things that typically makes a lot of money right away, but then has diminishing returns after you have to continue supporting the game with very few that actually manage to do it well long term. But he does make very rich, interesting fantasy worlds that would be pretty fun to explore in an open world setting such as an MMO. I don't think as an open world it would maybe be as fun without the MMO setting, because one of the things that makes open world exploration particularly fun is getting to do it with other people. For a lot of us, some people can just spend hundreds or thousands of hours exploring an open world all by themselves and they're perfectly content, and I'm not judging you for that. I used to be able to do that a little bit more when I was younger, but that was never fully my cup of tea. I've always liked doing that with friends and other people. Almost every single time I used to play one of those older open world games, my biggest complaint always would be, man, this would be so much more fun if there was a multiplayer aspect to this game, if I could co-op this with a friend and we could run around the world together doing things. And I think in most open world settings, that's what I default to now. It's one of the things that when I'm not streaming it, I very much like about Genshin Impact, because I can invite somebody over and we can just run around the world together. If you give me that option in the game, I'm far more likely to play it. But if they could make it succeed, a Mistborn or Stormlight Archive MMO, either of those really wouldn't be that bad. There's a lot to the world that you could expand upon, give plenty of quests, plenty of lore to dive into. I just don't see it being the wisest choice. It's too much of a risk. Okay, yep, that's all I have to say on that. I wish Mr. Sanderson the best of luck in finding it. Mostly because I want to play it, right? I wish him the best of luck because I want to play it. Please, go. Find a good studio. Find the one who's going to give you the best game possible for your adaptation. Be involved in it. Make sure that it is pretty true to your books. And then advertise it so I know when it's out and I'll go play it. It sounds like a potentially really fun way to enjoy the world that you've been building. Speaking of fun worlds, just a little bit of note. Normally I don't talk about things that are coming to networks, especially old things. But apparently Gintama is coming to Netflix very, very soon. Finished series, but I love Gintama. I might work it into my rotation of things that I leave on the TV while watching, or like while doing chores. I highly recommend anybody who remotely likes that type of stuff to watch Gintama. It is definitely not for everyone. It is a very, 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 very Japanese show. It was a very, very Japanese manga. It's one of those ones where it being Japanese is very important to the humor. You can't actually change the humor. They tried to localize it at one point, and they tried to do a dub. I think it was Funimation that tried, and they thought, yeah, we're just gonna change any joke that doesn't make sense. It was a horrible dub. I think they only did like 1 or 2 seasons of it, and everybody laughs at it. The show was just not good. When you do that, it loses all sense of identity. The stuff they came up with is not as funny as the original. Maybe it could be to some Western viewers because maybe they just didn't understand the Japanese humor. I wouldn't be surprised if the localizers didn't understand the Japanese humor, and that's part of why they changed it. But given the fact that it is basically an alternate timeline where aliens took over Earth back during the Edo period of Japan, and then everything progressed in that direction into like a sci-fi mixed kind of almost Fifth Element-y story, where Earth is just like a port, a trading post, where aliens are constantly coming on and off. Humans don't really have too much of a right to the world they live on, but they live there anyway. Because samurai were the last bastion against the original invading alien force. Being a samurai has been completely outlawed. So much of that show, of even the manga before it, the identity is wrapped into the Japanese-ness of it. Netflix did not say if they were doing a new dub of it, so I hope it is just the sub. I hope it's the old subs too. The old subs were pretty good. I really hope that Netflix doesn't decide to resub Gintama and make them worse somehow. I would not be surprised, honestly. But I'm kind of excited to watch through it again. It might be one of the best shonen comedy series ever made, possibly. It's up there for sure. It'll be a great chore watch. When I'm like cleaning the countertops or doing the dishes or something, the large living room TV is just right there. I can blast it. Basically hear it from any room in the house. I will interchange between rewatching all of Bleach, but now also rewatching Gintama, which are actually two series that are great to watch together. Because one of the very recurring things in Gintama was the fact that Gintoki, the main character, would often read Shonen Jump and a few other manga. He was into mostly shonen manga. That's what the character read. And there are often times where he would be like, man, I wish I could go Bankai or whatever. And even at least once in the series where, for just comedic reasons, he's able to use Ichigo's Magetsu transformation, which is pretty cool when it happens. Completely useless at the same time, but pretty cool when it happens. And so there are two series that are pretty good to watch in tandem. Trying to remember. Let me go back through my notes. What else did I have to talk about today? What did I not talk about since last time? Oh! That's right. There was a Genshin Impact special program last week that I just didn't end up talking about. I think possibly part of that was because of the cancellation of some shows. I probably should have talked about it on Friday, but it didn't come up because it happened to, oddly enough, air at the time that I would have been running the show on Thursday. And the next version actually looks really fun. I shouldn't say actually. All of Nodcry has been really fun. I don't think they've been dropping the ball on it since they've started. I know there's been some hit and misses in the previous version with Natlin, but Nodcry has just been consistently good all the way through so far. It may be the best version of the game that they've made. I don't know. It's still going. I can't really judge it until it's over, but it's shaping up to be that way. And one of the coolest things about it is laced into the story. You get it for free as long as you complete the story quest. The travelers will finally be getting a new outfit. We've been asking for them to have some type of skin or outfit since the beginning of the game. Even after other characters slowly ended up getting different outfits. They still just did not give anything to the Traveler. Very upsetting because there'll be scenes. You'll see scenes where the Traveler's wearing something different in an illustration, right? Where they'll be narrating or dialoguing over an illustration because they didn't feel like animating the scene. That's not a complaint about them. I love the visual novel storytelling where there's just like this very detailed animation and characters are talking over it. I think that's a perfectly fine way of doing things. I like to use my imagination to fill in the rest of the scene from just that keyframe. I personally find storytelling better and more memorable when my imagination has to be invoked in it. I might be in a minority of modern players this way, but I'm also probably not a modern player as somebody who grew up with older video games. Still, the main point was you see them in different outfits all the time. We know that both travelers, depending which one you picked, Paimon, have had swimsuits. They've had like kimono. When they were in Inazuma. There's a lot of different scenes throughout the game where they wear different clothes for just that illustration. And the benefit of illustration is that they don't ever have to model the outfit. Well, after popular demand, they will be finally getting an outfit. It's really cool, actually. They've showed them off. They are a bit more covering than the previous outfits, which makes sense because Nodcry is a pretty cold place. It's appropriate to the region that they're in, but the two travelers, depending on which one you picked, will actually be getting a outfit that is in the opposite color palette of their other sibling. So now you have options. If you preferred playing as one or the other, but you actually liked the color palette of the opposite one, you'll be able to switch between the two outfits whenever you want. That's pretty cool. They also showed off a few other skins that they're dropping out in time for Lantern Rite, because the Chinese New Year is soon coming upon us. It will be the year of the horse, which also shows that they are releasing a horse Adeptus character at the same time, fittingly. Be leaving the year of the snake, which means I have to get art ready very soon. I think I have, like, what, a month? It only takes me like a day to make my typical Lunar New Year piece, but if I don't get started on it, it just won't happen. So I should probably get started on it soon. But yeah, I can't wait. I think the first phase, I can't remember the character's name, but it will be the Horse Adeptus. That will fit the Lunar New Year. The second phase will be Columbina, who is the big pull a lot of people have been waiting for. And you know what? I guess maybe I will pull Columbina. I wasn't originally planning to necessarily. Maybe I was going to casually pull for her. But trying for the second time to get Verissa and failing for the second time, being unguaranteed, you know what? Maybe I'll just save up and pull for Columbina anyway. She will be a direct buff to my Navia team, because apparently lunar crystallize for Geo characters is going to be a thing. And it looks pretty whack. Like, you just pick up 3 of the crystallized little diamond things, the crystals that are forming around, and then turrets pop up and start doing Geo damage to people. And that's pretty cool. I like that. So maybe I'll heavily invest into that. That might be pretty fun. We also got some news in between now and then for Star Rail. They already dripped both of the next 2 characters, the first 2 characters for Plain Arcadia. One of them is, they're both Elation characters, but one of them is one of the other generals in the Xinjiao fleet. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I actually think I have it right here. Let me look. I might have to scroll up just a little bit. Okay, it was Yao Guang. Looks kind of cool. She's classically kind of got like a Kiana face, because half their characters do. Though I do not believe she's supposed to be Kiana. It's just they do have a lot of characters that have a lot of visual similarity to each other. She's got like a peacock outfit to her, which probably goes a lot with the Elation themed. I didn't realize one of the Xinjiao generals was going to be Elation, but I guess you don't want them all to be Hunt, even though they all follow the Hunt, I guess. I don't know. I guess it's more fun if they all have different personalities and play styles, whatever. She's probably going to be dancing, I would assume, with the peacock outfit and Elation. And the other one is a character called Sparksy, who, yes, is just Sparkle. She looks cool. A Sparkle with white hair, Alice in Wonderland theme, Elation path. I don't know if it's a disguise. She kind of looks, some people are saying is like Sparkle's VTuber persona in a way. I like the naming convention in the other languages. Sparkle's name is typically in most languages that use Chinese characters, 2 symbols, right? Like I know in Japanese specifically, it's hanabi, which means like fire flower or like fireworks. And her alternate name, they just switch the symbols, which then says hibana, which means spark or to spark. So it still has a similar meaning, but it's a different name. It's one of those classic pseudonyms where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to rearrange the letters in my name to spell a different name. But in English, they're calling her Sparksy. I don't know how I feel about the English name. It's a little dumb, but it's almost dumb in a funny way that fits the character of Sparkle, so maybe it kind of wraps back around to being good. I haven't decided yet. I'm still kind of thinking about it. The design is good, and I do really like Sparkle as a character, so yeah, I'll probably end up pulling for her. Sparkle's also getting a buff, so that's going to be pretty good. Maybe both her forms will work together on a team well. And Black Swan is too. Anyhow, that's the 55-minute mark. You've gotten your mandated time with the medal today. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please grab that link from wherever it is, share it off with somebody else. Make sure you're following, and I will see you guys same time, same place tomorrow, unless something else happens. Take it easy.